please open your Bibles at Joshua chapter 8. We've now become familiar with the thoughtful and skilled manner in which the author of Joshua tells his story. Faced then with the rather peculiar structure of this chapter, we're bound to look for the rationale behind the way the tale is told, and in that way discover the point it is making. Sometimes a zoom lens technique is helpful in studying a passage, and that's true here. At the beginning of chapter 5 we noted that chapters 5 to 8 are marked off as a section by the similar introductory formulae in chapter 5 verse 1 and 9 verse 1. The present chapter therefore brings this section to an end, and this seems to thrust verses 30 to 35 into the limelight as a sort of mini conclusion. The fact that the content of these verses is also unexpected, we might expect more ripping yarns of victory, seems to further highlight these verses. In addition to this, there is something of a pattern discernible in chapters 5 to 9. The stories begin and end with Israel at worship in chapter 5 verse 2 to 12 and 8:30 to 36. And within this envelope there are two accounts of Israelite victories, in chapter 5 verse 13 to 6:27 and in chapter 8 verses 1 to 29, with the centerpiece being the defeat at Ai in chapter 7 verses 1 to 26. This establishes two parallels in this chapter, 8 1 to 29 with 5:14 to 6:27 and 8:30 to 35 with 5 2 to 12. Thus chapter 8 verse 1 to 29, which we're looking at here, parallels the victory over Jericho. A more detailed analysis of the chapter will also show that verses 1 to 2 and 18 are thrust into prominence and provide the key to the understanding of the rest of the material, though such a detailed analysis cannot be undertaken here. The moment we start reading this chapter, we sense we are hearing echoes. Thus the first verse, with its reassurance, "Do not be afraid, do not be discouraged," brings chapter 1 verse 9 back to mind. And the "I have delivered into your hands" reminds us of chapter 6 verse 2. It's possible that "take the whole army with you" is a veiled criticism of Joshua's conduct in chapter 7 verses 3 and 4, but perhaps more likely it is a way of stopping Israel glorying in their achievements. Certainly the repetition of earlier promises without any mention or concession to recent events is a message of grace, since the words indicate God is ready once again to fight for his people, not against them. And the victory is secure. Once again, the past tense is used. Verse 2 strikes, however, a different note. In contrast to chapter 6 verses 18 and 19, the spoils of Ai may be appropriated. We're told you may carry off the plunder and livestock for yourselves. Achan's covetousness was unnecessary. The Lord is no one's debtor, but he does expect the first fruits. The story then begins to take a different turn from the Battle of Jericho. Here the people have a more active role. Set an ambush behind the city, we're told in verse 2. And thus the following verses 3 to 8 describe careful planning and a thoroughly thought out strategy by Israel's commander, within the parameters of what the Lord had commanded, of course. Israel had to learn that God does not always work in the same way. God was letting the people in lightly. Thus at Jericho they did nothing. Here they have to learn to flex their muscles. What will come next? The details of the combat described here are confusing, but then warfare often is, and has taxed scholars down the centuries. But this confusion should not become a distraction. Slowly but surely, with the steady but emphatic plod of a village policeman, the inevitable is described. Thus, and artistically, the glory of the Lord is praised. And the story seems to be told twice, or at least there are two parallel sections. Thus in verse 18, which commences the second part, the Lord's command and Joshua's immediate response is recorded. Again, the Lord's specific guidance is filled out by Joshua's initiative, and the people's sterling efforts and success achieved as the Lord had instructed Joshua, as verse 27 reminds us. So AI is defeated, another community overthrown. It becomes another barren site with no inhabitants but the birds of prey and the memorial to another cursed man whose earthly remains lie under a monument to the folly of a failure to follow the Lord. AI is forsaken under the curse of the Lord, but not to be forgotten. The stones are a perpetual reminder of the call to obedience and the folly of unbelief. Indeed, this is highlighted throughout these verses. Without the Lord on their side, the inhabitants of AI demonstrate their ignorance, stupidity, and naivety. And so it can be with us.